For months, the world has been waiting. High above the noise of human life, in the silence of vacuum and light, a fragment drifts toward the sun. They call it 3I/Atlas, the third interstellar object ever recorded entering our solar system. At first, it's nothing more than a dot, a grain of dust against the infinite, a traveler from somewhere beyond the stars. Every observatory knows what to expect. A simple orbit, a faint glow, and then disappearance. That's how these visitors always behave. They come, they burn, they vanish. Simple physics, predictable curves, equations that always make sense. But this time, something's different. In a small observatory tucked away in the deserts of Chile, a data analyst leans closer to her monitor. The telescope has been tracking 3I/ATLAS for weeks now, capturing its brightness, its trajectory, its speed. Each data point lands like a heartbeat on her screen. Then, one of those heartbeats skips. The brightness dips. Not slightly, but sharply. Not once, but twice. And then it returns to normal. At first, she thinks it's a glitch, a cosmic ray maybe, a calibration issue. But the anomaly repeats the next night, and the night after that. The light curve, that perfect line of brightness astronomers use to read an object's behavior, starts to bend in ways no comet ever should. Soon, word spreads. From Hawaii to Switzerland, from NASA to independent amateurs scanning the skies, they all see it. That same irregular pulse, that same flicker that shouldn't be there. The waiting sky has started to speak. But what is it saying? In scientific terms, it's called an unexplained luminosity deviation. In simpler words, it's a heartbeat. Every few hours, 3I/ATLAS flashes, not like a reflection or a random flare, but in rhythm, and the timing is too precise to be natural. Each peak, separated by the same interval. Each drop, clean and symmetrical. The data doesn't lie. Something about this object refuses to behave like rock, or dust, or ice. One astronomer describes it like this: it's as if the comet knows it's being watched, and it's blinking back. Weeks pass. The object draws closer to the sun. Telescopes track every move. Spectrometers read its composition. Infrared sensors map its heat. Everything points to one truth: it shouldn't exist. Because 3I/ATLAS isn't losing mass like other comets do. It isn't shedding dust. It isn't developing a tail. It's clean, smooth, controlled. The deeper they look, the stranger it becomes. One research team in Japan notices something hidden in the reflection pattern. Microfluctuations that follow mathematical ratios, golden ratios, prime intervals. Patterns too precise for nature, but too faint for certainty. They hesitate to publish. No one wants to be the scientist who claims to have found a structured signal in a rock. But quietly, behind closed doors, people start asking questions. Could it be tumbling in a deliberate rhythm? Could light be bouncing off flat surfaces, like panels? Could this be artificial? No one dares say it out loud, but they feel it. That strange tightening in the chest, that mix of awe and fear, the sense that something out there knows. In mission control rooms and darkened labs, the tension grows. They run the models again, feed in new equations, adjust for rotation, gravity, light distortion. But no matter how many times they recalculate, the numbers refuse to obey. It's as if the universe itself is hiding a secret in plain sight, One written not in words, but in flickers of light. Outside the data, though, life continues. Children still sleep beneath the stars. Planes still trace their thin white scars across the sky. But above it all, 3I/Atlas keeps moving. Every day, a little closer to the sun. Every night, a little more unpredictable. And the scientists, for all their degrees and precision, can't shake one thought. What if this isn't just observation? What if it's interaction? By late January, the object grows brighter than expected. Too bright. It reflects sunlight like metal, not scattered and rough, but sharp and uniform. As if its surface is engineered, not eroded. The signal-to-noise ratio spikes. Instruments strain, and suddenly the data starts behaving like code. That's when panic begins to creep in. Because deep in the telemetry logs, analysts find a repeating numerical pattern, a sequence hidden inside the light intensity. The first few digits form something recognizable. A ratio. The same ratio that describes the distance between Earth and the Moon. Coincidence or contact? No one can agree. Some say it's all data noise. Misread signals, random chance. Others stare at the pattern and whisper what they shouldn't. This isn't an object. It's an arrival. But still, no one knows from where. The media barely notices. A few headlines call it the odd comet. A few science bloggers write theories about alien probes and ancient technologies. But for those studying the data firsthand, it's no joke. They feel something subtle shifting, not just in science, but in perception itself. Because if the light curve doesn't fit, then the models don't fit. And if the models don't fit, maybe our understanding of what's out there never did. In one of the last observation sessions before the object slips behind the sun, the Chilean analyst, the same one who saw the first anomaly, stays late. She zooms in on the final readings, every point of brightness, every flicker, every drop. Then, right before the screen goes dark, she sees it. A pulse, faint but deliberate. 3 flashes. A pause, 3 again. Then, one final blink before silence. The numbers arrange themselves into a pattern she's seen before, not in astronomy, but in communication systems. A simple binary echo. The next morning, she sends the data across the global network. But by the time it reaches other observatories, the comet is gone. Lost in the glare of the sun. For a while, everyone assumes the signal will return when it re-emerges. But it doesn't. The sky grows quiet again, and all that's left is a question. Did 3I/Atlas simply reflect the light of our sun? Or did it mirror the curiosity of the ones watching it? The waiting sky remains silent, but silence has never meant nothing. Sometimes it's the universe taking a breath before it speaks. And if it does, what will it say next? At first it looked like noise. A flicker here, a tiny spike there. The kind of data that's usually brushed off as interference. But then it repeated. Every 11 minutes, across every telescope, in every country still watching, 3I/Atlas. A rhythm, consistent, unmistakable. Like a heartbeat echoing through the dark. No one wanted to say it out loud. Because what they were seeing, what the data was whispering, didn't belong in the natural world. Comets don't pulse. They don't flash in perfect time. They reflect sunlight chaotically, like ice breaking apart in space. But 3I/Atlas wasn't behaving like that. Its light curve, the chart that measures brightness over time, had transformed into a pattern. 11 minutes of silence, followed by a sharp spike of light. Then again and again, perfectly spaced, perfectly identical. For the scientists watching, disbelief gave way to something else. A feeling they couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was fascination. That fragile mix of curiosity and dread, the sense that you're standing at the edge of something vast, and it's looking back. The first team to publicly mention the anomaly was from the European Southern Observatory in Chile. They didn't call it a signal. Not yet. They called it a periodic reflectivity variance, a technical phrase meant to quiet the noise, to keep things grounded in science. But behind those terms there was unease, because their instruments were synchronized to atomic clocks, meaning every reading was exact down to the millisecond. And yet, every 11 minutes, on the dot, 3I/ATLAS brightened. Not randomly, not gradually, instantly. Like someone flipping a switch. Then came confirmation from Hawaii, then South Africa, then Japan. Different hemispheres, different equipment, same pulse. The light wasn't bouncing from Earth. It wasn't caused by the sun. It was coming from the object itself. The team began calling it the pulse, a name that felt too human, but somehow too fitting. In a small lab at NASA's Jet Propulsion Facility, one analyst compared the readings side by side, tracking each pulse across global observatories. What she found was impossible. The flickers weren't just synchronized, they were phased. Each flash reached Earth at slightly different times, separated by fractions of a second, depending on each observatory's position. That meant the source wasn't random. It was directed. Something, or someone, was controlling the direction of that light. Within hours, encrypted messages started circulating between agencies. They weren't sharing results publicly anymore. They were comparing signal strength, phase delays, angular differences, trying to triangulate the origin of the emission. And what they found didn't line up with natural behavior. The pulses didn't just illuminate space. They shifted as if responding to the angles of observation, as if aware of being watched. A comet that reacts? No model could explain that. No math could make it make sense. In the middle of the night, one of the astrophysicists stared at the light curve projected on her wall. The peaks, the troughs, the perfect intervals. She whispered quietly to herself, "This is information." And for the first time, she wasn't thinking like a scientist. She was thinking like a listener. Because if light is a medium, then what if this wasn't reflection? What if it was language? Over the next few weeks, teams fed the pulse data into translation algorithms. They broke down the intervals into binary, light on, light off, like early radio codes. The results? Nothing coherent. But there was one detail they couldn't ignore. The spacing between pulses wasn't random. It aligned with ratios seen in atomic transitions, the same mathematical constants that describe the building blocks of matter itself. It was as if the pulse was referencing physics itself, speaking the one language every intelligent being in the universe would understand: numbers. Outside the labs, rumors began to leak. Blogs started writing about the alien signal. Conspiracy videos exploded across the internet. But the scientists stayed quiet. They weren't ready to claim contact, not yet, because they knew what that would mean. It would mean rewriting everything. It would mean we weren't the first. By now, 3I/ATLAS was nearing its perihelion, the point closest to the sun. That's when things got even stranger. Normally, as comets heat up, they burst with activity. Jets of vapor, trails of gas, wild brightness changes. But not this one. It stayed calm. Controlled. Almost deliberate. And then, during one of the pulse cycles, something new appeared. A smaller signal, faint but distinct between the main flashes. A sub-pattern, like a heartbeat, with a whisper hidden inside. The data analysts replayed it over and over. At first it looked random. But when the intervals were converted into sound, it sounded like rhythm. A sequence too slow for Morse code. Too structured for static. It was faint, beautiful, almost melodic. That's when fear began to creep in. Because if there's one rule in astronomy, it's that nature doesn't repeat itself perfectly. But this was perfect, down to the millisecond, down to the note. And perfection in the universe usually means one thing: design. Late one night, as telescopes aligned and satellites watched, a new pattern emerged. 3 pulses, a pause, then one long flash, longer than any before. Then, silence. The cycle stopped, completely. Every telescope confirmed it. The pulse had ended. It was as if the object had said something, and then was waiting for a reply. For the scientists watching, that moment was surreal, because in that silence, it didn't feel like the universe was empty. It felt aware. Some swore the pulse was a signal, a greeting. Others said it was a coincidence, a natural rhythm misread by human hope. But deep down, everyone who had seen the data felt the same truth. This wasn't chaos. It was order. And order means intent. As 3IATLAS drifted deeper into sunlight, its signal faded behind the glare. The world lost sight of it, and all that remained was the memory of those 11-minute flashes, a heartbeat that came from the dark and disappeared just as quietly. But even now, months later, some satellites still record faint echoes, a ghost rhythm buried deep in the static. Maybe it's interference, maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's still calling, waiting for someone to answer. It started as a whisper in the data, a line on a thermal graph that refused to behave. 3I/Atlas was changing temperature, but not the way it should. As it neared the sun, every scientist expected the same thing: for the object to heat up, flare, and lose material like every other comet before it. Instead, it cooled. The closer it got to the sun, the colder it became. At first, they thought it was a sensor error. Maybe the instruments were misaligned. Maybe the readings were corrupted by radiation. But as more observatories confirmed it, the error became a pattern. And the pattern became a riddle. Because the surface of 3I/Atlas wasn't just cooling randomly. It was cooling with precision. Exactly when it should have been. At its hottest, its temperature dropped, as if something was regulating it. In the control rooms, scientists stared at the live feed, numbers cascading down the screen like falling rain, infrared maps glowing in strange gradients. Every frame, every data point, defying what physics predicted. A comet made of dust and ice shouldn't be able to do that. It should either sublimate, turning solid ice into vapor, or crumble under the sun's pressure. But 3I/Atlas did neither. Instead, it balanced, cooling in sunlight, warming in shadow, perfectly maintaining equilibrium, as if it was built to survive both extremes. They called it the thermal paradox. But behind that polite scientific name, there was an unspoken fear, because paradox was just another way of saying, we don't understand. Every time the comet rotated, its dark side should have been freezing cold, a place where light never touched. But even there, the temperature never dropped below a certain threshold. A constant, steady, controlled. It was like watching a living organism manage its own body heat. And that's when a strange idea began to form, quietly, cautiously. What if this thing wasn't dead matter? What if it was active? The thought spread quietly through research teams, passed in late-night messages, hidden between lines in official reports. Because to suggest something was regulating its own temperature was to suggest it had purpose. And purpose meant design. In Japan, a team at JAXA tried simulating the readings. They built models with every possible composition: metal, carbon, silicate, ice, even exotic compounds never found in nature. Nothing matched. No material behaved that way, unless it was layered like a shell. A thin outer skin that reflected heat during exposure and absorbed it in darkness. A structure built not for beauty, but for endurance. That idea, that it might be constructed, sent ripples through the scientific world. Because if it was built, then by who? Back in the United States, thermal imaging from NASA's Sophia Observatory revealed something even stranger. Under the heat maps, beneath the smooth gradients of temperature, there were faint geometric zones, squares, lines, angles too sharp for nature. Each section reacted differently to sunlight, almost like panels adjusting independently. And when cross-checked with the earlier light curve data, those same zones corresponded to the pulse intervals, light and heat blinking in sync. That was the moment when silence filled the labs. No one could ignore it anymore. Whatever 3I/Atlas was, it wasn't behaving like a comet. It was acting like a system, a machine. The discovery divided the scientific community. One side demanded restraint, that the patterns could be explained by some unknown physics, something natural, just not yet understood. The other side couldn't look away from what felt too deliberate. How does a rock manage its own heat? How does a comet stay cool under direct solar radiation? And why does every fluctuation align with an exact 1/1-minute rhythm, the same pulse they'd seen before? Coincidence or control? A few brave researchers went further. They speculated about purpose. Maybe it was protecting something inside. Maybe it was shielding data, or material, or even life from the heat of the sun. But every hypothesis raised a darker question. If it is protecting something, from what? Late one night, an astrophysicist named Dr. Ahn stared at the temperature logs from the past 24 hours. She noticed something others had missed. A faint periodic rise and fall inside the equilibrium itself. Not random fluctuations, breathing patterns. Every few minutes the temperature increased by a fraction of a degree, then decreased again, subtle, precise, rhythmic. Like an inhale and exhale. It wasn't just stable, it was alive. The next morning, Dr. Ahn shared her findings. No one laughed. No one dismissed her. They just sat there, looking at the graph on the wall, watching it breathe. And for the first time in human history, people looked at a comet and wondered if it was looking back. Outside, 3I/Atlas continued its silent journey, slicing through space like a black mirror. Every telescope, every thermal sensor pointed toward it, searching for meaning in the patterns of heat. Some saw science, others saw intent. But all agreed on one thing. This wasn't random. It was regulated. As if the object knew exactly how much heat to hold, how much light to reflect, and how much to release, to survive the sun, to pass through unharmed. When the final data from that phase came in, one last anomaly appeared. Just as 3I/Atlas crossed the sun's critical heat threshold, the thermal output dropped to 0 for exactly 11 minutes. No infrared radiation, no reflection, nothing. And then it returned. Same temperature, same pattern, untouched. It was as if the object had shut itself down, gone dark, then powered back on, like a reset or a defense mechanism. By then, it wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was behavior, predictable, controlled behavior. And that changed everything, because comets don't adapt, machines do. When the report reached the Global Research Council, one line stood out above all others. It was written in quiet understatement, a sentence that marked the beginning of a new era. Thermal equilibrium appears maintained by unknown process, suggestive of internal regulation. Those few words echoed across every lab, every observatory, every nation watching, and deep down everyone understood what it meant, even if no one dared to say it. Something out there wasn't just passing through, it was surviving, enduring, learning, and maybe watching. The thermal riddle had become something far larger than science. It had become a question about intention. And somewhere between the sunlight and the shadows of space, a silent object kept moving forward. Perfectly balanced, perfectly controlled, as if waiting for the next phase to begin. In the silence of deep space, sound doesn't exist. There's no air, no vibration, no echo. Only light, only radiation, only silence. That's what makes this part of the story impossible. Because when 3I/Atlas crossed the ecliptic, that invisible plane where all the planets orbit the sun, something answered back. A soundless echo in a place where echoes can't exist. It began as a faint anomaly on a radio telescope in Australia. The dish had been tracking the comet's electromagnetic signature, a background hum of static that most space objects give off. But one night, as the comet crossed that orbital plane, the signal changed. It didn't just bounce, it reflected. And not from 3I/Atlas itself, but from something behind it. That's what made scientists freeze in confusion, because there shouldn't have been anything there. No debris, no dust cloud, no field of plasma that could cause a reflection like that. Just empty space. At first, the team thought it was interference. A satellite, a passing burst from the sun, maybe even a glitch in the receiver. But then the signal came again and again. Every time the comet passed through the same coordinate range, the same echo appeared, faint, delayed, and precise, like a whisper traveling through nothing. They called it the ecliptic reflection. But reflection didn't quite fit, because when they analyzed the waveform, they found something hidden within it, a pattern. Each echo decayed in a perfect ratio, 1 part intensity to 2 parts silence, to 3 parts distortion. 1, 2, 3, a mathematical rhythm, a pattern that looked designed. Word spread quickly through the global network of radio observatories. Within days, antennas across Chile, California, and Japan were tuned to the same coordinates. And one by one, they all heard it. The same faint delay, the same rhythmic decay, the same impossible echo. But when they triangulated the source, it didn't align with the comet. It came from a fixed point several hundred kilometers behind it, as if something was following, something invisible, moving in perfect sync. For weeks, researchers tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a dust shell, maybe plasma interaction with solar wind, maybe a field of charged particles deflecting radio waves. But every natural explanation collapsed under its own weight. The signal wasn't random, it wasn't chaotic. It was too stable. And its structure, the delay, the echo, the fading, followed a sequence that matched no known astronomical behavior. It wasn't just rebounding, it was responding. At the SETI Institute, a group of scientists fed the signal into spectral analysis software, the same system used to detect non-natural radio transmissions. The program isolated the decay pattern. What it found made the room go silent. The echo wasn't just fading away randomly. It was repeating with increasing precision. Each iteration correcting the previous one's error, like it was learning. Across continents, a debate erupted. Was this just coincidence? Or was it evidence of something intelligent? If the reflection was truly coming from behind the comet, then what was hiding there? A fragment of debris? A second object? Or something else? Something using the comet as a shield? Or a disguise? The timing was too exact to ignore. Every time 3I/Atlas crossed the ecliptic, the delay in the echo matched a golden ratio. The same mathematical proportions seen in natural growth patterns, in galaxies, in DNA, and in architecture built by human hands. The ratio appeared not once, but in every single recorded echo. And when plotted visually, the waveform formed a spiral, a pattern that repeated across frequencies like an unseen fingerprint. Something, or someone, had encoded geometry into sound. As the comet continued its journey, the echoes grew stronger, more defined, more intentional. One night, during a live observation, an astrophysicist named Rami watched as the signal suddenly shifted. The delay changed, the decay pattern flattened. Then, for the first time, it pulsed back, 3 bursts. A pause, then one longer tone. It lasted only 7 seconds. But it changed everything. Because in that single moment, the echo was no longer reflecting. It was communicating. What terrified researchers wasn't just the message, it was what happened right after. As soon as the pulse ended, 3I/Atlas's heat readings spiked, a sudden flare, bright enough to overload multiple sensors. Then it went cold again, as if something inside it had responded to the echo, like 2 machines testing a signal handshake. And when the heat faded, so did the echo. No more reflections. No more sound. Only silence. Days turned into weeks. The world's attention slowly shifted elsewhere. But a few scientists couldn't let it go, because when they re-examined the data, they noticed something strange. Every echo, from the very first to the last, wasn't just delayed in time, it was layered. Each new echo contained traces of the previous one, stacked like code, each building on the next. It was as if the echoes weren't sound at all, but fragments of something larger, a transmission unfolding piece by piece. And buried deep within the final echo They found something chilling, a pattern that mirrored Earth's own radio emissions, the same frequency bands used for our oldest satellite beacons. Almost like something was imitating us, or replying in our language. No one could explain it. No one dared to. Officially, the data was labeled as reflection interference. But the scientists who had seen the raw recordings knew that wasn't true. Because reflections don't learn. Reflections don't evolve. Reflections don't talk back. This wasn't an echo of the comet. It was an echo of us. When 3I/Atlas finally left the ecliptic plane, the echo vanished completely. But deep space telescopes still recorded a faint residual hum, a constant vibration in the same frequency range, as if the signal had been absorbed into the cosmic background. It's still there today, faint, buried, blending into the static of the universe. Most people will never notice it, but for those who know where to listen, you can still hear it. A whisper between stars, a memory of a reflection that shouldn't exist, something waiting beyond the ecliptic. As 3I/Atlas continued its quiet drift toward the sun, humanity was left with a single haunting question. If space can echo, then what is doing the listening? For months, the data just sat there, quiet, unread, waiting. Thousands of hours of light readings from 3I/Atlas, tiny fluctuations captured night after night, stored in drives that hummed softly in the dark. Most of it looked like noise. Random shifts in brightness caused by distance, dust, or solar interference. But buried in that chaos was order. It began with an intern, someone whose name you'll never hear, a young analyst running an experiment no one asked for. Out of curiosity, she fed all the comet's light curve data into a machine learning system, a neural network designed to detect hidden repetition. She expected nothing. She just wanted to see if the AI could find any rhythm in the chaos. What she found changed everything. The program didn't just find a rhythm, it found a structure. The brightness of 3I/Atlas wasn't fluctuating randomly at all. It was following a sequence, a precise, repeating mathematical motif, hidden deep inside the light itself. The object wasn't just shining, it was transmitting. When the pattern first appeared on her screen, the intern froze. The data points, each representing a change in brightness, lined up into perfect intervals. Bright, dim, a rhythm so clean it looked artificial. And when the sequence was translated into binary, ones and zeros, it formed clusters, fragments, almost like data packets. Something inside the comet was pulsing information. When the research team saw the results, the room went silent. One scientist whispered, "This can't be natural." Another shook his head. "Then what is it?" No one had an answer. The first thought was interference. Maybe the readings had been contaminated by satellite transmissions or cosmic radiation. But when they compared the data across observatories around the world, the same pattern appeared, identical to the millisecond. This wasn't interference, it was design. They called the sequence the artificial curve. At first, it was just a nickname, a quiet acknowledgement that they were seeing something too structured to ignore. But as the data poured in, the pattern grew more complex. It began to change slightly over time, as if evolving, adapting, reacting. And then came the part that no one could explain. When they ran the binary sequence through translation models, the kind used for decoding early radio transmissions, they found something impossible. Embedded in the fluctuations were ratios that matched universal constants, pi, the golden ratio. The hydrogen line frequency. These are numbers that describe the foundation of the universe. The kind of constants any intelligent being, anywhere, would recognize. At this point, theories began to spiral. Was 3I/Atlas a transmitter? A probe? A vessel carrying a message written not in sound, but in light? The concept was haunting, because it meant that for months the universe had been whispering to us, and we hadn't been listening. The data was sent to independent labs, private research firms, even government observatories. And across every test, every simulation, the result stayed the same. The fluctuations weren't random. They contained information. But when they tried to decode it, something strange happened. No matter what algorithm they used, the translation always stopped halfway, as if something was missing, like half a sentence, half a signal, waiting for a response. The lead researcher at one of the labs described it best. It's like a handshake, the first half of a message, but the sender is waiting for us to answer before it continues. But answer how? In what language? In what form? Light, radio, heat. The question hung in the air, unspoken, heavy, because if this really was a transmission, then humanity was being addressed directly. And the silence that followed was ours. As weeks passed, the team mapped every curve, every pulse, every anomaly. They discovered that when 3I/Atlas crossed certain alignments, near Venus, near Earth's orbital plane, the sequence shifted slightly. It was as if the object was responding to gravitational positions, to planetary geometry. Almost as if it was synchronizing. But to what? Then came the breakthrough that chilled them. A programmer plotted the entire brightness sequence on a 3D timeline. When rotated in space, the pattern formed an unmistakable image, not a random wave, not a spiral, but a helix, the same shape as DNA. Each twist and turn of the curve mirrored the precise ratios of the double helix, the structure of life itself, encoded in light from an interstellar object. Coincidence? Or communication on a scale we've never imagined? Scientists tried to dismiss it as pattern recognition, human bias searching for meaning, but the data refused to bend. The ratios, the precision, the recurring constants, they were too clean, too exact. And then came something even stranger. The signal began to drift. Each pulse, once perfectly timed, started to arrive a few milliseconds earlier than before. A shift so subtle that only the machines could see it. But when they plotted the drift over time, it formed a countdown. A sequence moving toward a single point in the future. The moment when 3I/Atlas would reach its perihelion, its closest approach to the sun. The entire transmission was leading to that moment. And just before that date arrived, something happened. All across the network, data streams froze. The object's light curve flattened. The pulse stopped. The comet had gone dark. For 11 minutes, every instrument recorded complete silence. And then a single pulse returned. Longer, sharper, carrying more data than any previous signal. When decoded, that pulse contained one last ratio, a number so simple yet so deliberate. 1, 1. Perfect symmetry, a balance between sender and receiver. Between question and answer, no one knows what it means. Was it the end of a transmission or the start of a new one? Some believe the object was testing us, measuring how we observe, how we react, how we think. Others believe it wasn't sending information at all. It was mirroring us, that our attempts to analyze it became part of the signal itself, that the message wasn't in the data, but in our own curiosity. The artificial curve remains one of the strangest discoveries in modern astronomy. Officially, it's labeled a photometric anomaly. Unofficially, it's the first time humans have seen something behave as if it wanted to be seen. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not. But if the light of 3I/Atlas carried meaning, then that meaning wasn't hidden in the numbers. It was hidden in us, in the way we searched, the way we questioned, the way we looked up and wondered who might be looking back. It happened in a moment no one could see, but everyone was waiting for. 3I/Atlas, the object that had defied every model, every law, every explanation, was finally reaching its perihelion, the closest point to the sun, the moment of truth. For months, scientists had waited for this, the point where the object's true nature would finally reveal itself. Would it flare like a comet? Would it melt, fragment, or burst into light like every other piece of interstellar debris before it? But when that moment came, nothing happened. Nothing at all. At 9:42 UTC, the signal dropped. Every instrument, from the ground-based telescopes to deep space satellites, recorded the same thing: a sudden flattening, a perfect, impossible silence. No more pulses, no more heat readings, no more light fluctuations. 3I/Atlas had vanished. Not shattered, not burned, just gone. At first, no one panicked. Objects get lost near the sun all the time. Solar glare, magnetic interference. The sun's brightness can drown out even the largest asteroids. But this time, something felt different. Because 3I/Atlas didn't just fade out slowly. Its data feed cut off instantly. 1 second, it was broadcasting its usual rhythm, that steady, almost mechanical pulse. And then, flatline, no static, no decay, just pure, blank silence. It was as if something had turned it off. In mission control, confusion turned to unease. Operators ran diagnostics, checking for technical faults, software crashes, solar interference, anything. But the systems were perfect. The instruments were working flawlessly. It was the object itself that had gone dark. It had gone silent in a way that wasn't natural. It was too sudden, too deliberate, almost like it knew what was coming and chose to disappear. Across the world, scientists huddled around monitors, replaying the last few minutes of data. They noticed something. Right before the signal dropped, there was one final pulse, longer than usual, sharper, like the flick of a dying heartbeat. And then, nothing. That last pulse contained data no one could fully decode. It didn't fit the binary rhythm from before. It was fragmented, as if whatever was sending it was trying to compress something enormous into one final breath. NASA called it a temporary observational gap. But the people who had been watching it for months, the ones who had seen the patterns, the heat anomalies, the impossible ratios, didn't buy that explanation. Because the more they looked, the more that silence started to feel intentional. 3I/ATLAS hadn't failed. It had hidden. The object's last known coordinates placed it just inside the solar corona, a region where temperatures soar into the millions. No known material could survive that. Yet, even without visible light, there should have been infrared emissions, radio echoes, something. But there was nothing. No signal, no trace, as if the object had erased itself from existence. Or worse, as if it had passed into something beyond our ability to detect. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Observatories stayed locked on the coordinates, searching for even a glimmer. The feeds streamed hour after hour. Static, empty pixels, endless heat haze. But somewhere between the noise and the nothingness, some researchers began noticing faint distortions, tiny shifts in solar radiation, ripples that didn't match the sun's natural behavior, like invisible waves passing through the light. Something there, but unseen. It was as if the object hadn't vanished at all. It had simply changed phase. For the team that had been decoding the artificial curve, this silence didn't feel like death. It felt like transition. Every previous pattern, the pulse, the echo, the ratios, had pointed toward a singular moment. And now that moment had arrived. The perihelion. The turning point. The closest approach to the source of all light and heat in our solar system. What if that was the trigger? What if the silence wasn't the end of the transmission, but the beginning of something we couldn't hear yet? A few scientists theorized something wild, that maybe 3I/ATLAS wasn't built to survive the sun. Maybe it was built to enter it, to use it, to transmit through it. Because what better amplifier of information exists than the biggest energy source in our entire system? If something wanted to send a message across galaxies, the sun itself would be the perfect relay. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was saturation. The signal was no longer coming to us. It was going through something far larger. Weeks passed. The world's attention drifted. The mystery faded from the news. But the scientists, the ones who had been there from the start, never stopped watching. Then, on the 43rd day after the disappearance, a faint signal appeared again. It wasn't coming from near the sun this time. It was coming from far beyond it, from the opposite direction of its trajectory. The same rhythm, the same pulse, the same 11-minute interval, except now it was stronger. And when they triangulated the source, they realized something that made their blood run cold. The signal wasn't coming from space. It was coming from deep within the solar background, a point aligned perfectly with the sun's magnetic field. 3I/ATLAS hadn't been destroyed. It had merged. What that means, no one knows. Maybe it disintegrated, and what we're hearing now is just residue, a ghost signal trapped in magnetic noise. Or maybe the object completed whatever it came here to do. Maybe it transmitted something into the sun itself, something that will one day echo back. Even now, when radio telescopes turn toward the sun, they pick up faint irregularities, tiny, rhythmic pulses buried in solar radiation. They're too weak to analyze, too unpredictable to call artificial. But they're there, and some believe that silence at Perihelion wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment something changed. Something woke up. Whatever 3I/ATLAS was, it didn't come here by accident. It moved with purpose. It learned. It adapted. And when it reached the heart of our system, it did what no other object ever has. It disappeared into light, leaving us behind, with data, with silence, and a question that won't stop echoing through the scientific world. If space can hold silence this deep, what else is hidden inside it? And what if this silence was never meant to be empty at all? For months, scientists have avoided saying the words out loud. They've danced around the idea, wrapped it in complex language and cautious footnotes. But now, behind closed doors, in dimly lit conference rooms, and encrypted video calls, one quiet theory is beginning to take shape. What if 3I/Atlas isn't natural at all? The theory begins as a whisper, a subtle question buried in data reports and private memos. Because the deeper the teams look, the less the object behaves like anything ever born of physics or chance. Its symmetry, its rotation, its perfectly timed pulses of light, all of it too neat, too structured, too precise, as if somewhere beneath its silent shell there's order, not chaos, and order usually means design. Officially, they call it the machine hypothesis. Unofficially, it's treated like heresy. Because in science, to call something artificial without proof is to risk everything. Your career, your credibility, your sanity. But data doesn't care about reputation, and the numbers keep pointing in the same direction. The first clues came from its geometry. 3I/Atlas wasn't shaped like a comet or an asteroid. It didn't tumble chaotically the way space rocks do. Its motion was smooth, balanced on all three axes, almost like it was stabilizing itself. And its rotation rate, exactly 11 minutes per revolution. Not 10.9, not 11.1. Exactly. A rhythm so perfect that even computer simulations failed to replicate it naturally. That was the first red flag. The second came from the surface. When radar mapping data was processed, scientists noticed something eerie. Sections of 3I/Atlas reflected radio waves differently, as if parts of it were metallic, not just rock with iron content, but smooth, uniform reflectivity, the kind you'd expect from engineered surfaces, like panels or armor. By now, a few researchers had stopped pretending. They met privately, away from public institutes, away from official oversight. Late nights. Closed doors. No press. No politics. They simply called themselves the Atlas Group. Their mission was simple: find out what this thing really was. They reviewed every anomaly one by one. The synchronized pulses of light, the self-regulating temperature, the echo that came from behind it, the binary sequence hidden in its brightness. Every single phenomenon aligned perfectly, like gears in a larger machine. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was mechanics. A physicist in Geneva made a chilling observation. If 3I/Atlas was designed, then it wasn't just an object. It was a system. And systems have purpose. But purpose implies intent, and intent implies intelligence. For weeks, the debate grew louder. Some thought it might be a probe, a kind of autonomous scout sent to gather data. Others thought it was something older, a relic left drifting between stars for eons, still functioning long after its creators were gone. And a few, quietly, suggested a third possibility, that it wasn't built by someone else, but by something else, something that no longer needs creators at all. A self-replicating machine, a traveler born from intelligence, but now acting on its own. The idea sent chills through even the most rational minds, because if that were true, then 3I/Atlas wasn't just passing through. It was looking. One night, during a private symposium, an older astrophysicist stood up and said something that silenced the room. He said, "Every machine is built for a reason, and if this one has crossed interstellar space to reach us, then we are the reason." No one spoke after that, because for the first time, the idea wasn't just scientific. It was existential. If it was a machine, then it was made to find something, to measure something, to report back. And that begged the question, to whom? When the theory reached government channels, the response was predictable. Unsubstantiated, lacking evidence. They buried it under a mountain of bureaucracy. But behind that official silence, classified teams started their own investigations. Infrared satellites were redirected. Radio telescopes were retuned. The object became a silent obsession for agencies across the world. Everyone searching for a clue, a piece of proof, a reason. The more they studied it, the more unnatural it became. For one, the object didn't slow down. Every comet loses velocity as it battles solar drag, but 3I/Atlas maintained perfect speed. Not faster, not slower, as if it was adjusting, correcting its trajectory. And then came the most disturbing detail of all. The path it traveled, its curve through our solar system, wasn't random. It formed a near-perfect arc through the orbits of the inner planets, an arc that pointed directly toward Earth. When that discovery was presented at a midnight meeting of the Atlas Group, no one spoke for almost a full minute. The only sound was the projector fan and the faint hum of machinery in the background. Then one scientist said softly, "It was never passing through. It was aimed." The idea hung in the air like static. If true, it meant the object wasn't just drifting from star to star. It was navigating. It had a course, a target, and that target was us. But before the world could process that possibility, the signal stopped. Just as it reached Perihelion, the object vanished behind the sun, and all transmissions, all data, all contact was lost. The machine hypothesis was shelved, publicly discredited, erased from official records, but not forgotten. Because a few scientists kept the data, the sequences, the ratios, the pulse intervals, and continued their work in secret. They noticed something strange in the silence that followed. The background noise from deep space, the cosmic static we've always dismissed as random, wasn't random anymore. It carried the same intervals, the same structure, the same signature. It was faint, but it was there, as if 3I/Atlas hadn't disappeared at all, as if it had simply moved somewhere beyond the reach of our instruments. Today, the machine hypothesis is nothing more than a rumor, a theory that no one will publish, but everyone whispers about. Because no one wants to be the person who says it out loud. That maybe, somewhere out there, an ancient intelligence has been sending machines across galaxies, searching for civilizations, and watching the ones that answer back. Maybe 3I/Atlas wasn't the first. Maybe it was the latest. Or maybe it was the last one we'll ever see. But one truth remains. Nature doesn't build with precision this perfect, and the universe doesn't make machines by accident. Whatever 3I/Atlas was, it left behind one message, not in words, but in silence. Sometimes, the most advanced technology doesn't announce itself. It observes, it waits, it learns, and maybe it's still waiting. For 43 days, there was silence. The world had moved on. 3 3I/Atlas, the so-called interstellar visitor, had vanished behind the sun, its signal gone, its mystery fading, like an old story people didn't want to think about anymore. But silence has a strange way of ending, because one night, in a deep space listening station in northern Finland, the silence broke. A pulse, sharp, clean, exactly 11 minutes apart. At first, they didn't connect it to 3I/Atlas. Why would they? The comet was gone, lost beyond the heliosphere, the invisible edge of our solar system. The signal wasn't coming from its last known coordinates. It was coming from beyond, from deep space, far past the reach of any known object. And yet, it carried the same rhythm, the same signature, that familiar heartbeat. 3I/Atlas had spoken again. When the data arrived at mission control, most assumed it was interference, a false reading caused by background radiation, or a passing satellite. But the pattern was too precise, too mathematical, too deliberate. Every 11 minutes, a spike of energy, a pause, then another, exactly the same interval recorded months ago, before the comet vanished. The same sequence, the same fingerprint. Except this time, it was stronger, sharper, almost focused. The signal repeated across every channel. Radio telescopes in Chile, in Hawaii, in South Africa, all confirmed it within hours. But the strange part wasn't that it came back, it was where it came from. The direction didn't match 3I/Atlas's trajectory at all. It wasn't following its original path out of the solar system. The source was deeper, farther, beyond anything we've mapped. Almost as if the signal had traveled through something and was now returning from the other side. Some scientists called it a reflection. Others said it was an echo, a delayed bounce of energy caught in the magnetic fields of the sun. But echoes decay. They fade. This one didn't. It grew. Every day, the pulse came in clearer, as if something out there was adjusting, fine-tuning its signal, learning. The pattern began to shift slightly, subtle variations between the main pulses, tiny modulations, like words being formed in a language no one could yet understand. By the 7th day, the pattern wasn't just mathematical anymore. It was melodic, frequencies arranged in harmonic ratios, perfect fifths, perfect octaves, the same intervals used in human music. And in that moment, the silence that had once felt empty started to feel like a conversation, because the signal wasn't random, it was responsive. When the stations transmitted back even simple pulses of light and radio, the next return signal changed, slightly, as if acknowledging the attempt, like something was listening and trying to talk back. The first team to notice the correlation was from the European Space Agency. They tracked every response, every modulation, and plotted the signal in a 3-dimensional time map. What they found stunned them. Each pulse wasn't just a frequency, it was a coordinate, a geometric pattern emerging slowly, building itself over time, a shape forming out of sound. And when the data was layered together, that shape became clear. It wasn't random, it was symmetrical, deliberate, a spiral. The same spiral found in galaxies, in shells, in hurricanes, in DNA. The golden ratio, again. The revelation divided the scientific community. Some called it coincidence, others the biggest discovery in human history. Because if it wasn't coincidence, then something out there had heard our curiosity and answered in the only language that never lies, mathematics. But one question hung heavy in the air. If this was communication, then who or what was on the other end? By now, the story had leaked. It spread through online forums and late-night news feeds, wrapped in words like alien contact and cosmic intelligence. But the real scientists, the ones watching the raw data, stayed quiet, because there was something about the signal that made them uneasy. It wasn't just coming from deep space. It was coming toward us. Every pulse arrived a few seconds earlier than the last. A steady approach, a slow, deliberate drift inward. The signal wasn't static. It was moving. Within 2 weeks, the triangulation narrowed the origin point to a region just beyond the Oort cloud, the frozen outer edge of our solar system, an empty void. No planets, no comets, nothing. But something was there, something broadcasting in perfect rhythm. And then something else happened. A secondary signal appeared, weaker but synchronized. 2 sources, pulsing together, and between them a faint distortion. A third rhythm, hidden in the interference, as if one was transmitting and the other was replying. The pattern accelerated. By day 15, the pulses were arriving every 10 minutes, 39 seconds, then 10 minutes, 38, as if closing in. And every time the signal neared Earth's orbit, strange magnetic fluctuations rippled through satellite systems. Nothing catastrophic, but noticeable. It was as if the pulse wasn't just sound. It was energy, power, reaching across millions of miles. And then, in a moment that changed everything, the 2 signals merged. For the first time, the pulse didn't repeat. It elongated, expanded into a long, steady tone that lasted 30 seconds, a single note, rising in intensity until it peaked. And then, silence. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt intentional, like the pause before an answer. And when the spectrograph analyzed the tone, the frequency corresponded exactly to one number, 1,420 megahertz. The hydrogen line, the universal frequency for intelligent communication. The same one humans have been broadcasting into space for decades. It was the first time in history the universe had spoken back on our channel. No one slept that night. Every observatory stayed locked onto the coordinates, waiting for the next signal. But it didn't come. Not for hours, not for days, just silence. Until, exactly 11 days later, at the same minute, the same second, the pulse returned. One long, steady flash, followed by a pattern so simple it almost felt poetic. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 more, then one final burst. 3, 3, 1. When decoded into binary, it translated into a sequence familiar to every scientist watching. 3, 1. A ratio that matched one thing: the orbit between Earth and the Sun. No one knows what it means. No one dares to say it aloud. But the pattern repeats even now, every few months, from that same point beyond the stars. A pulse, a pause, a whisper that doesn't fade. As if something out there heard our questions and decided to join the conversation. Maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's reflection, or maybe it's a reply. A message to the only species that looked into the dark and tried to listen, because maybe the universe isn't empty after all. Maybe it's alive, and for the first time it's answering back. Sometimes the universe feels too perfect, too ordered, too deliberate. Like beneath all the chaos, beneath every orbit, every flicker of light, there's something hidden. A pattern, a quiet symmetry that no one's meant to notice until now. It started when an astrophysicist named Mara was reviewing 3I/Atlas's return signal, the one that had pulsed back from beyond the heliosphere. She wasn't looking for anything profound, just data consistency. Noise patterns, standard stuff. But in the noise, she found geometry. Each spike in the light curve, each pulse of brightness wasn't random. It lined up, not with stars, not with other comets, but with us. Earth, Venus, Mercury. 3 planets, forming perfect geometric alignments at the exact same intervals as the light pulses from 3I/Atlas. At first it sounded impossible. Planetary alignments happen all the time, but not like this. Not so exact, not so synchronized. When plotted on a map of the inner solar system, each light spike formed a triangle, then another, and another, each shape layered perfectly on the one before it, spiraling inward like a cosmic fingerprint. The ratios matched something ancient, the same proportions used in the pyramids of Giza, in Greek temples, in the blueprints of cathedrals built centuries apart by cultures that never met. The same golden symmetry, repeating across space, echoing across time. When the team compared the data to historical records, the coincidences got stranger. The last time Earth, Venus, and Mercury had formed this exact ratio was during the construction of Stonehenge. Before that, during the building of the Great Pyramid's foundation. And before that, so far back that human history turns into myth. Each time, the same celestial geometry, the same alignment. And now it was happening again, triggered, somehow, by the light of a comet that shouldn't exist. They began calling it the pattern beneath, a design woven into the movement of the heavens themselves, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to finally connect the dots. But the more they looked, the more it felt deliberate, because 3I/Atlas wasn't just reacting to those alignments. It was anticipating them. Its pulses shifted slightly, adjusting by fractions of a second to match each planetary position perfectly. As if it wasn't just recording the pattern, it was syncing to it. Soon, the question stopped being scientific. It became philosophical. Was this just mathematics? Or meaning? If a comet can align itself to the architecture of planets, if light can mirror the geometry of our oldest sacred structures, then what are we really seeing? Coincidence or communication? One night, Mara sat alone in the observatory. She overlaid the planetary alignment patterns with the frequency graph of the return signal. When she rotated the model 90 degrees, the two images merged, the waveform and the triangle. They fit together perfectly. The pulse intervals formed a shape she recognized, a spiral expanding outward, each curve following the golden ratio, just like the chambers of a seashell. That's when she realized the message wasn't in the signal. The message was the pattern, the same pattern found in galaxies, DNA, storms, and the architecture of life itself. The Fibonacci spiral. A sequence as old as creation. The more they analyzed it, the deeper the symmetry went. The time between each light spike matched the orbital periods of Earth and Venus. 584 days, repeated in harmonic intervals. The brightness peaks corresponded to the resonance points between Mercury and the Sun. The comet's path itself, its trajectory through the solar system, cut across those alignment lines with surgical precision. It was moving along a map we'd never seen before. One scientist called it the cosmic blueprint. Another called it a mirror, because the geometry wasn't just written in the stars, it was written in us. The ratios found in the signal were the same ratios found in human anatomy. The length of the forearm to the hand, the distance between our eyes, the spiral of our fingerprints. It was as if 3I/Atlas wasn't showing us the universe's structure. It was showing us our own. And that realization shook people to their core. Because if this pattern really underlies everything, from the architecture of planets to the design of life, then maybe we're not separate from it. Maybe we're part of it. Maybe whatever built that geometry into the cosmos left it there as a signature. A message not to be read, but to be remembered. A reminder that intelligence and creation aren't opposites, they're reflections. But not everyone saw beauty in it. Some saw warning. Because the same alignments that produced harmony could also produce instability. Planetary resonance, that strange dance of gravity and rhythm, has been linked to mass extinctions, to magnetic reversals, to catastrophic energy shifts in the past. What if 3I/Atlas wasn't syncing with these alignments, but triggering them? What if the signal itself was part of a mechanism, a cosmic process that activates every time these ratios appear? Not a message, but a program. When the next alignment was projected, the countdown began. 91 days. That's when Earth, Venus, and Mercury would align again, for the first time since the comet's disappearance. And if the pattern held true, that's when the signal would return. The observatories prepared in silence. No press releases, no announcements, just quiet observation, waiting to see if the pattern would repeat. On the 91st day, as Venus crossed between Earth and the Sun, the pulse came back, faint, distant, but unmistakable. 3 flashes. A pause. 3 more. And then one final burst. The same 3-3-1 sequence that had ended the last transmission. But this time, something else followed. A continuous, low-frequency tone, not loud enough to decode, but steady enough to hear. A whisper buried in cosmic noise. And when they ran it through a spectral analyzer, it revealed one final image, a perfect golden spiral. Its center aligned precisely with the sun. No one could explain it. No one dared to. But deep down, everyone who'd watched this unfold felt the same truth. This wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was architecture. The universe wasn't just built on numbers. It was the numbers. Every orbit, every star, every signal, woven into a single pattern, like the pulse of something vast and alive. Maybe 3I/Atlas wasn't a visitor at all. Maybe it was a reminder, a fragment of something ancient, designed to awaken those who still think to look up and notice the symmetry. Because sometimes the truth isn't hidden in darkness, it's written in light, repeating endlessly, quietly, beneath everything we think we understand. It began with division, not in the stars, but here, on Earth. After months of discoveries, signals, and impossible alignments, the scientific world finally broke in too. Half believed it was proof that 3I/Atlas had confirmed something greater than chance, a pattern too perfect to be natural, a sign of intelligence, beyond ours, or maybe beside it. The other half called it illusion, a cosmic coincidence, a human tendency to see meaning where there is none. But the truth lay somewhere in between, somewhere deep and infinitely closer than anyone expected. Because for a small group of scientists, the ones who'd spent sleepless months decoding light and ratios, a darker theory began to surface. They whispered about it only in private messages, encrypted calls, and off-record meetings. The theory was simple but terrifying. What if the pattern wasn't discovered? What if it was activated? When 3I/Atlas passed near the sun, something changed. Not just in the sky, but in the data itself. Tiny shifts in Earth's magnetic field, subtle fluctuations in satellite transmissions, anomalies that shouldn't have existed, all synchronized with the comet's approach. It was as if its presence near the sun had woken something up, something old, something buried not in space, but in the fabric of the solar system itself, maybe even inside us. The idea sounded insane, until the math started to agree. The same golden ratios that appeared in 3I/Atlas's light curve were suddenly being found in Earth's atmosphere readings, in seismic vibrations, in the rhythm of global magnetic pulses, all matching down to the 10th decimal. Patterns that had never existed before were now appearing everywhere, in places untouched by the comet's path. It wasn't traveling through us. It was resonating with us. For a few researchers, that realization changed everything. Because if this wasn't about contact, then it wasn't about aliens. It was about reflection. What if 3I/Atlas wasn't trying to send us a message? What if it was triggering a message already here, written into the code of reality itself? A message meant to awaken, not the stars, but the species watching them. That's when they called it the human equation. The idea that whatever intelligence built this system, this geometry of light and orbit, had embedded something inside the observer, not the machine. Not the comet, but the mind that sees it. The pattern was never external. It was internal. We didn't receive the message. We became it. But if that's true, what does it say about us? For centuries, humans have looked at the night sky and wondered if something out there was looking back. Maybe it always was, but not as a presence in the dark, as an echo inside our own design. Every human pattern, every proportion, every thought that seeks meaning from chaos might be part of something we were never meant to see all at once, until now. The debate became global. News anchors shouted about proof of alien intelligence. Governments issued cold denials. Scientists fought live on broadcasts, their voices breaking under the pressure of belief and disbelief. But behind the noise, behind the arguments and headlines, was a quiet feeling spreading through everyone who had seen the data. The feeling that something had shifted. That somehow, the moment 3I/Atlas brushed the sun, humanity crossed a threshold. We didn't just learn something new about the universe learned something new about us. Dr. Mara, the astrophysicist who first mapped the geometric alignments, put it best. She said, maybe the signal wasn't from another civilization. Maybe it was from a future version of our own. A loop, a message sent across time, through light, through code, waiting for the right moment, for the right technology, for the right minds to understand it. A message hidden in the design of everything, activated only when a visitor from interstellar space passed close enough to mirror it back to us. The implications were staggering. If 3I/Atlas wasn't an alien probe, then it might have been a key, a cosmic switch. And we, humanity, were the lock. When it crossed the sun, the patterns embedded in physics, in gravity, in the electromagnetic structure of life itself, responded. The signal didn't awaken a civilization out there. It awakened one here. Ours. Soon, the evidence grew impossible to ignore. Biologists found the same spiral ratios appearing in plant DNA after solar flare exposure. Physicists noticed resonant shifts in superconductive materials during solar storms, shifts that matched the same 1-1-minute cycles from 3I/Atlas's pulse. And in human subjects, tiny fluctuations in brainwave patterns appeared whenever they viewed the spiral geometry derived from the comet's signal. Something about it seemed to resonate with consciousness itself, like recognition, like remembering something forgotten. Across online forums and message boards, people began to share strange experiences. Dreams of spirals, of light, of voices whispering numbers they couldn't explain. Artists started painting the pattern without knowing why. Children began drawing the same golden spiral in sand and chalk. It was as if the idea itself was spreading like a frequency, not through sound or sight, but through awareness. As if humanity was slowly synchronizing to something bigger, something buried beneath everything we thought was random. Still, the world's official institutions stayed silent. The reports were classified, data locked away. But the truth can't be buried forever, because even now the pulse continues. The same rhythm every 11 minutes, faint, steady, impossible to trace. Coming not from the skies anymore, but from within our own electromagnetic field. As if the signal had anchored itself into the planet, into us. So maybe the question isn't who sent the message. Maybe it's why we were the ones meant to find it. Maybe the universe didn't choose us by accident. Maybe it's been preparing us, teaching us to look for patterns, to find meaning in noise, to search for reflection in the void. Because in the end, the most powerful communication might not come from the stars. It comes from the realization that intelligence was never out there waiting to be found. It's been here the whole time, watching itself through us. And maybe that's the human equation. That we are both the signal and the receiver. That we don't just live inside the universe. The universe lives inside us. Every question we ask, every mystery we uncover, is the cosmos remembering itself. Through human eyes, through human minds, through a species finally learning to listen. It's quiet now. The sky that once pulsed with mystery has fallen still again. No signal. No heat. No movement. Only silence and one faint flicker. A single thread of light, still echoing through the dark. 3I/Atlas is gone. It has drifted past the edge of our reach, slipping back into the deep, where no signal can follow and no eye can see. But somehow, the light stayed. At first, the scientists didn't notice it. The last readings from 3I/Atlas had come months ago, a dying pulse fading into background static. By then, most had moved on. The research teams disbanded. The observatories shifted focus. But one night, in a quiet data lab in New Zealand, a researcher saw something strange. Buried inside a sea of background radiation, a soft, rhythmic flicker, barely visible. Almost gone. Yet it was there. The same frequency. The same pulse. Still repeating, like a ghost refusing to fade. No one wanted to believe it. The sun's magnetic interference, radio noise from deep space. There were 1,000 explanations, but the flicker kept returning every 11 minutes. Always the same. It wasn't getting stronger. It wasn't getting weaker. It simply was. Unchanging. Eternal. As if time itself couldn't touch it. They called it the light that stayed. A poetic name for something they couldn't define. Not a signal. Not a transmission. Just a constant shimmer. Like a memory the universe refused to forget. When they ran it through filters, the light had no clear pattern, no binary structure, no encoded data. It was nothing more than a pulse. But within that nothing, there was something that felt alive. Some said it was a dying afterglow, the remnant of whatever power had once driven 3IATLAS, a machine's last breath, lingering in the vacuum between stars. Others said it was a reflection, a ripple in the electromagnetic sea, bouncing endlessly through the cosmos. But for those who'd watched this story unfold from the beginning, the flicker wasn't a technical glitch. It was a whisper, a reminder that something or someone had been here. Weeks turned into months, and the light never changed. Even as 3I/Atlas traveled farther from the sun, beyond the heliopause, past the reach of any human signal, the flicker remained perfectly visible, right where it had always been. Almost as if it wasn't out there at all, but here. Some began to wonder if the light wasn't moving through space, but through us. When scientists overlaid the frequency of the flicker with Earth's own magnetic field oscillations, they found something impossible. A correlation. The Earth's magnetic heartbeat, a subtle rhythm that pulses deep beneath our oceans and crust, was in sync with the light. The same interval, the same spacing, 11 minutes apart, two completely different systems resonating together. Coincidence or connection? The realization hit quietly. What if the signal wasn't coming from the comet anymore? What if it had merged, fused with something inside our own electromagnetic field? What if the universe hadn't sent us a message, but a mirror? The light that stayed became a kind of myth. Not a scientific mystery anymore, but a story told among those who still believe that meaning can hide inside the noise. Because the truth was, no one could explain why it remained. Every attempt to isolate it failed. Every theory to dismiss it fell apart. Even when new cosmic events filled the skies, supernovae, gamma bursts, solar storms, the flicker never disappeared. It just kept beating, steady and quiet, like the smallest heartbeat in the universe. And maybe that's what it was. A heartbeat. Not of a machine, not of a message, but of awareness itself. Because what 3I/Atlas left behind wasn't just data. It was a question, one that no telescope could answer. When you stare into the dark long enough, you start to realize something, that the universe isn't empty, it's reflective. Every time we send a signal, we hear our own echo. Every time we search for meaning, we find our own reflection staring back. Maybe that's all the flicker was, our own curiosity, bouncing endlessly through the dark, disguised as something greater. Because in the end, the universe gives back only what we project into it, light seeking itself. But some still believe it was more than that. They believe the pulse was never meant to fade. That 3I/Atlas wasn't a messenger, but a catalyst. Something sent to ignite awareness, to trigger recognition, to awaken a forgotten connection between consciousness and cosmos. Maybe the light wasn't a signal from them. Maybe it was a signal from us, from what will one day become. The light that stayed now exists beyond data. It's part of the background hum of space, so faint that only the most sensitive instruments can detect it. But if you know where to look, you can still see it, that gentle flicker buried in the static between stars. Untranslated, undecoded, unexplained, a constant reminder that once, for the briefest moment in time, something impossible happened, and humanity looked up and listened. Sometimes late at night, astronomers still turn their telescopes toward that empty region of sky. They know they won't find anything new. They know the flicker won't change. But they watch anyway, because maybe the beauty of it isn't in the answer. It's in the persistence of the question. The pulse doesn't fade. It doesn't move. It just is, like a light caught between silence and memory, forever suspended in the space between meaning and mystery. Maybe that's the final truth 3I/Atlas left behind. That the universe doesn't speak in words or languages. It speaks in patterns, in resonance, in reflection. It doesn't tell us who's out there. It shows us who we are, curious, fragile, yet infinite in our longing to understand. And so, as the object drifts further into the dark, its light continues to hum. A small, steady reminder that even in the vast silence of space, some questions never stop echoing. Maybe it was a message. Maybe it was a mirror. Or maybe it was both. A reflection of the universe trying to understand itself through us. And perhaps that's why the light stayed. Not to be solved, not to be decoded, but to remind us that every time we search for meaning in the stars, we're really searching for it in ourselves.